What if I told you that the creator of the world's most famous, most vibrant paintings, like artworks
Mhm.
that literally sell for hundreds of millions of dollars today, only ever sold a single painting in his entire lifetime?
Yeah, and not just that. He actually considered his entire existence to be, well, a complete and utter failure.
Which is just wild to think about.
It really is. I mean, it completely shatters that comforting kind of sanitized image we have. You know, when you see a starry sky printed on a novelty coffee mug or a tote bag.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
We like to categorize his work as just beautiful art.
exactly. But the historical reality of the man who painted those stars is incredibly raw. It's messy and it's deeply painful.
Well, welcome to another deep dive. Today, we are taking you on a custom-tailored journey into the mind of one of history's most misunderstood, most caricatured figures. I'm talking about Vincent van Gogh.
And our source material today is this really comprehensive biographical and artistic dossier on the man himself.
Yes. And our mission here is to strip away all that pop culture mythology. We're tossing out the whole mad genius trope, you know?
Completely.
We want to uncover the real, fiercely dedicated human being who produced roughly 2,100 artworks,
Yeah, including 860 oil paintings.
which he did in just a single decade.
It's unbelievable output.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to really understand the artist, we have to look at the immense psychological weight he carried before he ever even picked up a brush.
Right. I mean, we usually picture artistic prodigies like holding a paintbrush before they can even walk.
Like Mozart with the piano.
Exactly. But Vincent, who was born in 1853 to an upper-middle-class family in the Netherlands, he was this very serious, quiet child.
Yeah.
And he carried a rather haunting burden from day one.
Yeah, this part of the dossier is so heavy.
It is. He was given the exact same name as an older brother who had been stillborn.
Wow.
And that brother was born exactly 1 year before Vincent was born. To the day.
I mean, just imagine carrying that kind of invisible ghost with you. Being like a replacement child. Walking past a gravestone in your town with your own name and your own birth date on it, just 1 year off.
It's incredibly morbid.
It really is. So it's no wonder his path to art wasn't exactly a straight line.
Not at all.
He actually started out in the corporate art world thanks to his uncle.
Right, he was working as an art dealer for a firm called Goupil and C.
Yeah, in The Hague and London and Paris. And he was quite successful initially, right?
It was. By the time he was 20, he was out earning his own father.
But he just grew to hate it.
Yeah.
Seeing art treated purely as a commodity, just as a decorative financial asset for wealthy people.
It deeply disgusted him.
Yeah, he grew resentful, he became super difficult to work with, and eventually he was fired.
And that dismissal triggered a massive pivot. I mean, he just swung in a totally different direction.
He turned to extreme religious fervor.
Exactly. He became a missionary in this destitute, working-class coal mining district in Belgium called the Boerenage.
And he didn't just casually preach poverty to these miners.
No. He lived it to an agonizing degree.
It reminds me of, like, that friend we all have who changes college majors or career paths 5 times. But with Van Gogh, he went 1,000% all in every single time.
To the point of self-destruction.
Literally. Like a method actor who gets so completely lost in a harrowing role that he forgets who he actually is. He took the church's teaching so literally.
He really did.
He gave away his comfortable bed to a homeless person. He chose to sleep on a pile of straw in a freezing hut.
And he starved himself, right, to support his impoverished congregation.
Yeah. But the church authorities, they didn't see this as holy.
No, they saw it as fanatical and embarrassing for them.
So they fired him for, quote, undermining the dignity of the priesthood.
What's fascinating here is that Vincent's intense, almost monastic devotion didn't simply disappear when the church rejected him.
Right. It had to go somewhere.
Exactly. That immense energy, that desperate need to find meaning and capture the essence of the human condition, it just transferred from religion straight into art.
And we know this because of his letters.
Yes. This shift is thoroughly documented. He wrote over 600 letters to his younger brother, Theo.
Theo was an art dealer too, right?
He was, and Theo became Vincent's lifelong financial and emotional lifeline when Theo finally suggested, hey, maybe you should take up drawing in earnest.
Vincent just dives in.
Yeah, his letters transform. They read like the diary of a deeply thoughtful man who is desperately discovering his true purpose.
But, raw, unpolished passion doesn't just automatically put perfect paint on a canvas.
It does not.
He had the vision, clearly. But his early attempts were totally technically flawed. As he began to paint, he realized his sheer willpower wasn't enough.
He needed technique.
Right. He was essentially screaming in a language no one could understand yet.
Yeah, if you look at his early masterpieces, like The Potato Eaters.
Oh, yeah. Very different from his later stuff.
Very. They were painted in these somber, dark earth tones. Lots of muddy browns and heavy greens.
And he sent them to Theo in Paris, right?
He did. And Theo flat out told him, Vincent, these are too dark to sell.
Because Paris was all about Impressionism at that point.
Exactly. The muddy colors entirely clashed with the bright, light-filled Impressionist trends that were just taking over the city.
So recognizing this gap between his vision and his execution, Vincent decides to seek out formal training.
Which is kind of ironic, given his personality.
Yeah, his stubborn independence made him a famously terrible student.
Oh, a nightmare of a student. There's this great story from a drawing class at the Antwerp Academy.
Tell them about the Venus de Milo incident. This is crazy.
Okay, so the instructor, a man named Siebert, tells the students to draw the Venus de Milo, the ultimate classical sanitized ideal of beauty.
Right.
But Vincent refuses. Instead, he draws the limbless, naked torso of a Flemish peasant woman.
Completely missing the point of the assignment.
Totally. And when the instructor vigorously corrects the drawing, he actually tore Vincent's paper. Vincent just flies into a violent rage.
He starts shouting at the teacher.
Shouting that a woman must have a pelvis in which she can carry a baby.
Okay, I have to push back on this, though.
If he hated formal rules so much, and he was so fiercely, stubbornly independent that he's literally screaming at his teachers over anatomy, why did he even bother attending these strict traditional art academies in the first place?
Because Vincent was acutely aware of his own limitations.
Really? Even with that ego?
Yes, he desperately wanted to capture what he called the guise of reality, not just some abstract fantasy.
Ah, I see.
He knew he needed foundational skills, things like perspective, proportion, modeling, even if he absolutely despised the rigid, lifeless way they were being taught.
He understood you have to master the rules before you can purposefully break them.
Exactly.
And break them he did, especially the moment he arrived in Paris in 1886 to live with Theo.
Paris was the absolute epicenter of the avant-garde.
Yeah, suddenly this Dutch painter who is totally accustomed to mud and shadows, he's exposed to everything. Impressionism, pointillism, Japanese ukiyo-e woodblock prints.
And his palette just explodes.
Completely transforms.
Those Japanese ukiyo-e prints were an absolute revelation for him.
How so? Well, traditional European art had spent centuries obsessing over Renaissance perspective. Vanishing points, realistic shadows, creating the illusion of 3D space.
Making it look like a photograph, basically.
Right. But ukiyo prints ignored all of that. They use these bold, flat planes of vibrant color and strong, dark outlines.
Oh, wow.
Seeing this completely shattered Vincent's academic training, he realized you didn't need photographic realism to convey immense emotional depth.
And he also absorbed the science of pointillism while he was there.
Yes.
Like, instead of mixing paints on a palette to create a dull, muddy green, you place tiny dots of pure blue and pure yellow side by side on the canvas.
And your eye does the mixing from a distance.
Right, making the colors literally vibrate. And he took that very scientific, precise approach and morphed it into his own signature aggressive brushstrokes.
He adopted this brighter palette because he came to a profound realization about color.
Which was...
The color wasn't just descriptive anymore. You don't just paint a sky blue because the sky happens to be blue.
Right.
He realized color has a psychological and moral weight to it. For instance, he started using yellow as a deliberate symbol for emotional truth, for sunlight, life, and ultimately for God.
But as much as his art was thriving in Paris, the reality of living there was incredibly toxic for him.
It was a disaster for his health.
Yeah, picture the lifestyle. Heavy drinking, specifically absinthe, which is notoriously intense.
Chain smoking.
A terrible diet. And just endless, exhausting cafe arguments with other artists about the future of modern art.
It completely burned out his fragile health.
Feeling worn out and just totally overstimulated, he fled the city in early 1888. He headed south to the sun-drenched town of Arles.
He was looking for light and this utopian dream.
And Arles is where he truly finds his mature voice. He rents 4 rooms in a building he famously painted known as the Yellow House.
Right.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. He approaches the Yellow House almost like a high-pressure startup incubator.
That is a great way to put it.
Right. He wants to create this sanctuary where the greatest artistic minds can live and work together to just revolutionize art.
A true artist colony.
Yeah. He decorates the space with some of his most incredible masterpieces. We're talking Starry Night, Over the Rhone, The Night Cafe, Bedroom in Arles.
Just unbelievable works.
And he invites the painter, Paul Gauguin, to join him, to be his co-founder, essentially.
Which is a huge deal for him.
Massive. To impress Gauguin and prepare for his arrival, Vincent paints an entire series of sunflowers.
Specifically for Gauguin's bedroom.
Yes. He was so incredibly hyped up, he wrote to Theo that he was painting them with the gusto of a Marseillais eating bouillabaisse.
He was just starved for intellectual companionship, and for someone to treat him on an equal footing.
The reality of two highly intense, egocentric artists trapped indoors together because it rained heavily that winter was absolutely disastrous.
It was a ticking time bomb. Gauguin was arrogant, he was domineering.
And Van Gogh was intense, incredibly needy, and terrified of abandonment.
So the tension just boils over. On the evening of December 23, 1888.
Yeah, they have this severe altercation. Gauguin threatens to leave, and Vincent returns to his room in a state of absolute distress.
This is the famous incident.
Right. He takes a razor and either wholly or partially severs his own left ear.
Yeah.
He bandages his bleeding head, wraps the severed flesh in paper, walks out into the freezing night, and delivers it to a local brothel they both frequented.
He hands it to a 17-year-old cleaning girl named Gabby.
And tells her to guard it carefully. It's just horrific.
It is. And this raises an important question about how we analyze historical artist mythology.
How do you mean?
Well, pop culture has framed this for decades as just quirky, tortured artist behavior, like it's some romantic gesture of madness.
Right, like he was just being wildly passionate.
Exactly. But if you review the medical consensus, the hospital diagnosis the very next day was acute mania with generalized delirium.
That's a serious medical event.
Extremely serious. Modern medical historians suggest it was likely a combination of bipolar disorder and possibly temporal lobe epilepsy.
Oh, wow.
And all of that was severely exacerbated by massive malnutrition and his severe absinthe abuse.
So it wasn't a romantic artistic statement at all.
Not even close. It was a devastating psychotic break, triggered by extreme emotional tension and the terrifying realization that his dream of an artist's colony was dead.
Because Gauguin fled Arles immediately.
He got on a train and never saw Vincent again.
And the townspeople of Arles were terrified of Vincent after this. 30 locals actually signed a petition to evict the man they called the red-headed madman.
Which is so sad.
It's heartbreaking. He was forced out of his dream home and placed into hospital care. He finally realized he could no longer live independently.
So, in May of 1889, Vincent voluntarily enters the St. Paul Asylum in Saint-Rémy.
Voluntarily?
Yes, it was a former monastery, and it provided him with 2 cells with barred windows, one of which he used as a studio.
But he was mostly confined, right?
Mostly, yes. So he painted exactly what was in front of him. The clinic corridors, the walled garden, and during his supervised walks, the surrounding landscape.
And this is where he becomes obsessed with the local olive trees and the cypresses.
Right.
He wrote to Theo that the cypresses were beautiful in line and proportion. He actually compared their dark, soaring shapes to an Egyptian obelisk.
That's such a striking image.
And looking out through the iron bars of his window, translating the night sky into this thick, swirling plasma of paint, this is where he creates the Starry Night.
His absolute masterpiece.
So I have to ask on behalf of the listener here, we've all heard the tortured geniuses trope.
Sure.
Was his incredible swirling style like we see in Starry Night, was that actually just a direct product of his madness?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we can thoroughly debunk that myth once and for all.
Okay, lay it out for us.
The consensus is that his illness actually paralyzed his ability to work. When he was having a severe mental crisis, he couldn't paint at all.
Really?
Yeah. The art was not the madness expressing itself.
So he was painting despite the illness, not because of it.
Precisely. His masterpieces were created during his lucid periods. When his mind was clear, he painted furiously as a coping mechanism. He was essentially fighting for his sanity with his brush.
Wow.
His late paintings show an artist at the absolute height of his technical abilities. He was longing for concision, for harmony and grace. The swirling skies and distorted landscapes, those are deliberate stylistic choices to capture the vibrating energy of nature.
Utilizing all that color theory and brushwork he'd perfected in Paris.
Exactly. It was not the random spasm of a failing mind.
He was painting to stay tethered to the world?
Yes.
So in May of 1890, feeling somewhat stabilized, he leaves the asylum. He moves to a village called Auvers-sur-Oise, near Paris.
He wants to be closer to Theo.
Right. And he's put under the care of a homeopathic doctor named Paul Gachet. But what happens in Auvers is it's almost impossible to fathom.
It's a creative explosion.
He goes into an absolute frenzy of creation. He paints roughly 70 oil paintings in 70 days.
That's over a painting a day.
Superhuman.
And this is where we see his masterful use of impasto and the alla prima technique.
Break those down for us.
So impasto is applying paint so thickly that it actually stands out from the surface of the canvas. It creates physical texture.
Like 3D paint.
Right. And alla prima, or wet on wet, means he wasn't waiting weeks for layers to dry like traditional painters.
Because he didn't have weeks.
Exactly. He was working incredibly fast, essentially sculpting with wet paint directly on the canvas to capture the immediate emotional impact of a scene, like those turbulent heavy skies in wheat field with crows.
But tragically, despite this unbelievable output, the crushing weight of his depression returned. And he had this deep fear of being a financial burden on Theo, who now had a family of his own.
Yeah, that weighed heavily on him.
On Sunday, July 27th, 1890, Vincent walked into a wheat field. Some sources say it might have been a local barn, and he shot himself in the chest with a revolver.
And it wasn't immediate.
No. The bullet deflected off a rib and missed his vital organs. He somehow managed to walk back to his inn.
Theo rushed from Paris to be by his side.
But an infection set in, and Vincent died 2 days later at just 37 years old.
His heartbreaking last words to Theo were simply, "The sadness will last forever."
Just devastating. And during his entire life, he had only sold that one single painting, The Red Vineyard.
The tragedy compounds almost immediately after, too.
Yeah, Theo's health rapidly declined.
Theo was already suffering from the advanced stages of syphilis, and he was utterly broken by his brother's death. His health completely collapsed. He died just 6 months after Vincent.
So Vincent died believing his life's work was a massive failure, which makes what happened next one of the most incredible turnarounds in the history of art.
It really is a miraculous aftermath.
Because who saved this legacy? It wasn't the fancy art critics.
Nope.
It wasn't his former peers in Paris. It was Theo's young widow, Jo van Gogh.
Yes.
She was suddenly left with an infant son, an apartment overflowing with hundreds of canvases the world considered completely worthless, and a massive stack of letters between her late husband and his brother.
Jo Bonger is truly the unsung architect of his legacy.
Completely.
She didn't just store the paintings in an attic. She relentlessly championed his work. She organized strategic exhibitions. She lent paintings to key galleries.
But her most genius move was the letters, right?
Absolutely. She painstakingly translated and published those hundreds of letters. By doing that, she allowed the public to read his brilliant, deeply philosophical thoughts.
The world finally saw the articulate, feeling man behind these intense, swirling canvases.
And eventually, that cemented his legacy.
Today, his works are among the most expensive ever sold. But, stepping back from the big auctions and the museum crowds, think about what this means for you, listening right now, navigating your own pursuits today.
It's a very grounding thought.
We live in a world that is so obsessed with immediate metrics. Likes, sales, instant validation.
Oh, absolutely.
Van Gogh's life is this stark reminder that the value of your work, the truth of your passion, and the uniqueness of your perspective, they aren't always validated in the present moment.
He did the work because he had to.
Because it was true to him. Regardless of the fact that the world completely ignored it or even mocked it at the time.
He sought the profound essence of life and translated it onto canvas, relentlessly pushing his technique forward, even when it cost him absolutely everything.
So, the next time you see a Van Gogh reproduction on a coffee mug or a poster somewhere, look past the bright colors.
So look at the texture.
Yeah, and remember the fiercely dedicated, deeply human man who painted it just to keep himself sane.
A truly beautiful way to look at it.
And I'll leave you with this final thought to ponder on your own. If Vincent van Gogh had actually found the massive commercial success, the wealth, and the widespread acceptance he so desperately craved during his lifetime, would he have continued to paint with such raw, unhinged vulnerability? Or does the comfort of success sometimes destroy the very hunger required to create a true masterpiece?